Immigration has been a federal issue forever. There's ample precedent in case law setting that out, and for some reason, right now, that's kind of up in it's up in confusion right now.
The back and forth rulings on whether Texas can arrest migrants suspected of entering the U.S. illegally. Will it become law? We'll hear from the experts. I'm Frank McCaffrey. Thank you for watching Inside Valley Politics, a new show dedicated to delivering fair and balanced political news that impacts the Rio Grande Valley. Now, the courthouse maneuvers on whether Senate Bill 4 should be enacted has left many on the border either confused or taking a wait-and-see attitude. Police, deputies, and migrants alike are waiting for the courts to see which direction the law that allows Texas lawmen to arrest and deport migrants who enter the U.S. illegally will take. The latest legal action came from a 3-judge panel of the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals that left the new law on hold for now. So what do the legal experts have to say about the uncertainties of the law? Well, our Brian Svensson has the story.
We'll see what the next couple of hours or days and weeks hold with regards to SB 4.
Governor Greg Abbott signed SB 4 into law last December. The federal government, along with the ACLU and other groups, filed a lawsuit calling the law unconstitutional. They argue only the federal government has the right to create and enforce immigration laws.
Immigration has been a federal issue forever. There's ample precedent in case law setting that out, and for some reason, right now, that's kind of up in it's up in confusion right now.
The controversial legislation empowers state and local police to detain and arrest people they think have entered the country illegally.
Once the order happens, let's say a state judge orders somebody removed from the country, how does that order get enforced? And more importantly, let's say the person is from India, how is that going to work?
In a statement issued Tuesday, the Mexican government says it recognizes the uniform migration policy of the U.S., but not those of state or local legislatures. Legal experts say there's still a lot of confusion about how the law would actually be implemented. Cameron County Judge Eddie Trevino says there's been no training and no protocols are in place.
There's a lot of areas open for interpretation. Each potential local law enforcement agency would be the one trying to determine how to address and how to enforce.
Trevino adds if the law were to take effect, even a few arrests across the state could cause problems for counties when it comes to jail space. Immigration attorney Ricardo Ramirez says lawyers could be stretched thin as well. Legal protections will still be in place for the undocumented when facing a state criminal charge. I'm Brian Svensson.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. Now, if the law eventually becomes law, how will they decide which migrants are caught? Now, the arresting officer must witness the person enter the country or see them on video. Those granted asylum or part of the DACA program cannot be forced to leave. Now, what happens to those arrested? The migrants can agree to leave the U.S. or they can be prosecuted for illegal entry. If arrested again, they face more serious felony charges. So, where will the law be enforced? In all of the state's 254 counties, not just those along the border, but the vast majority of the arrests are expected to happen within 50 miles of the border. Which places are off limits? Migrants cannot be arrested in schools, churches, hospitals, or other healthcare facilities. Where will they be sent is another question. Migrants ordered to leave will be sent to international bridges along the border, even if they're not Mexican citizens. And we are joined by Ricardo Ramirez. He is an immigration attorney with the law offices of Ricardo Ramirez in Edinburgh, Texas. Now, this SB 4 situation is very complicated, and we've been monitoring the news reports for the last week, and it's been up and down and up and down. 1 minute it's frozen, it's locked, the next minute you don't really know what's going to happen. So are you finding it to be complicated yourself?
Yeah, very much so. I think this past week with all the court rulings, Supreme Court, Fifth Circuit, it's been a whirlwind of information and statuses as to how this is all going to unravel in the future.
Okay, so what happens if SB 4 goes into play? What does that mean for the people who, here at the border?
If Senate Bill 4 goes into effect, essentially Texas will now have its own immigration enforcement branch. Mm-hmm. So every peace officer in the state is now essentially a de facto ICE officer. Every magistrate in the state, which includes, the Supreme Court justice right down to the justice of the peace, they're all now de facto immigration judges. So it really creates an entire new body of law that at this point everybody's unfamiliar with.
And it looks like the Supreme Court has handed a lot of this off to the Fifth Circuit Court. And, you know, the Fifth Circuit Court can make a decision that the Supreme Court can trump.
That's correct.
So it makes it even more complicated.
Right. So the Fifth Circuit has control over the case now, and they've set oral argument on the case for the 3rd of April, and that oral argument is to bring out the arguments as to whether or not the law is constitutional, whether it passes constitutional muster, and whether or not it can be brought into effect. Now the Supreme Court can review the decision of the Fifth Circuit. So however the Fifth Circuit decides, the Supreme Court still has the authority to overrule however they deem to rule the case.
Okay, and so what tips are you hearing for people here on the border? What tips do you want to get out there if someone's thinking about crossing, or if someone has a family member who's thinking about crossing? What would you like them to know?
Well, if you're thinking about crossing, do it through a port of entry. There's a lot of ways you can register yourself before you come to the United States, not without inspection. However, if you're here in the country and you're faced with the reality of an SB4 investigation, let's say you get pulled over, don't answer the question how you came into Texas. The law criminalizes illegal entry into the state of Texas, right? So if you're in the country, the officer didn't see you come across the river, but if they ask you the question, you can admit, and by admission, be guilty of the offense. So my biggest advice, and I heard other attorneys saying I wish you could put billboards all over the place to say, do not answer the question, how and when did you enter Texas?
And if you do that, and SB4 is coming to play, you could be putting yourself in danger of being sent straight back to Mexico.
Correct. SB4 creates a brand new code in the Texas Penal Code, Chapter 51. It creates new criminal laws. It creates new penalties for people that are found to enter Texas illegally. And it doesn't matter when. Someone could have entered 5 years ago, 10 years ago. If the state has probable cause to believe that you came in through Texas without inspection or not at a port of entry, you are subject to the penalties of Senate Bill number 4.
All right, and then that introduces a lot of complications. Now, one of the theories that we've heard over the years is that the immigration issue this is a conspiracy theory, a wild one, that it's an attempt to bring in new potential voters. Have you heard that from any of your clients? Is that true at all? Can we debunk that theory?
It's definitely something that I've been hearing myself, and I think it's very important to note that if you are not a citizen of the United States, you cannot vote. Full stop. You cannot vote. So this idea of bringing in these people to come in and vote is not tenuous. It's not legal. Yeah. Right. However, in the future, these people naturalize, or they have themselves U.S. citizens, they create potential future voters.
Okay, and so now, but there are potential dangers that now maybe people are hearing about. Are you hearing this from your client, from clients you've had over the years, like, hey, we're hearing about this thing SB4, and it's potentially dangerous for us, so we're going to hold off until that clears up. Right.
Yeah. A lot of people that could be subject to the penalties of SB4 are worried. They're afraid. They have a lot of uncertainties. They don't really know how the law is going to unravel, and that creates the uncertainty, which creates fear. But again, I think the best advice to anybody that is fearing this type of enforcement is to know your rights, is to talk to somebody, figure out how you can show some appropriate paperwork to make sure that you're not subject to this law.
All right, thank you very much, Ricardo Ramirez.
All right.
Coming up, Cameron County will have a new GOP leader while the Democratic chair has returned to office. We'll hear from both on the future of their parties.